Welcome to The Machine, a podcast from Waterford Institute of Technology. My name is Rob O'Connor. I'm a lecturer in the Department of Computing and Mathematics. And today we are going to talk about a topic that has crossed many of the staff members here path in the last few weeks, which is how do I go about buying a computer? Today in the studio, I'm joined by Mairead Marr.
Hi, Rob.
I'm afraid I don't have entrance music for you. Siobhan Drone.
Hello, Rob. How are you?
I'm fantastic. And Colm Dunphy.
Ta-da!
He had music. So, right. So, I don't know about you, but in the last few weeks, so here we are, we're talking now, it's September 2019. And for most of August and an awful lot of this week, I've been asked, what? I'm getting a laptop, or such and such is getting a laptop. What should I get? And unfortunately, I don't have an answer because it's one of those it depends questions. And I thought it might be an interesting one for a podcast to put out about, because whenever I've looked online about this, what I see is a list of specific models related to the time in which it was written. And what we all know about computing is that's out of date more or less the day it's written. So what we're going to talk about here is to lay out some tips and things you should look for if you're buying a computer. And then hopefully you'll be able to make an educated guess based around that and go with it. So, I don't know, we might even start with ourselves, just even talk about the machines that we have each, and our daily use machines. Now, I have a heap of computers lying around at home that I use for a whole variety of things, but my main machine of choice that I use for work and every day is a MacBook Pro. It's a fairly high-end one, but that was bought in 2014, so it's 5 years old now, and it's still going strong. So quite happy with that. Mairead?
Mine is MacBook Pro as well. I'd say it's probably 2015. And again, I think we're going to talk about interchangeable components later. But I got an SSD put into it instead of the old hard drive, so it's actually flying at the moment. It is kind of around the 2,000, 2,500 mark. It does last a little bit longer. It's beautiful, right?
Yeah.
It's again, you're tying yourself into Apple a little bit, but if you're prepared to go with that, that's good, you know. Yeah.
And Siobhan?
I use the Microsoft Surface Pro, so I'm on a PC. I think I'm the only person here that's using Windows as their primary machine on the panel that's here. So I use mine mainly for programming, so heavy programming, kind of running large IDEs, and it's great for that. Once again, it is on the higher end of the cost. You're looking at about 1,500 to 1,800 depending on what it is you're buying. But I specifically went for the PC because I wanted a touchscreen. I wanted to be able to record videos and be able to write on the screen as I was recording them, so that it was like a virtual whiteboard, so you could make little videos of your slide decks while it's recording you, and it was seamless for that. And it also converts into a tablet as well. You just pull off the keyboard and it's a tablet. So it's, once again, like, it's kind of the spec is quite good on it as well, but it's quite an expensive machine as well. But it's 3 years old too.
Yeah. And Colm?
Yeah, I'm a Mac man as well. So my machine is probably about 3-4 years old at this stage. Probably just over $2,000 for the base. And then there's all the adapters. So you add another 200 or 300 quid for all of those by the time you're finished.
And your main use case would be?
Media development. So you're doing video production, graphics production, programming. So it's quite a bit in there, but Mac is really, really good for media.
Yeah, and again, I would have a similar use case. But we've talked about a load of high-end machines there. They would be, but we would be professionals, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
So
we're making our money from this.
Yeah, well, the argument is that maybe you're not particularly professional, particularly looking at my purple t-shirt on. But the difference is there. We are professionals, and this is our primary machine for work. This is kind of your tool for work. Whereas not everyone will necessarily have that use case, and that brings us back to, I suppose, the first question I ask when somebody asks me the question of what laptop should I get or what machine should I get, I fire them back a question is, well, what do you want it for? And maybe, I don't know, maybe Mairead, you might take that. So, like, what would you say if somebody asks you what laptop should they get?
So, I think we're talking primarily about students, but not necessarily, you know. So it's like, as you say, about buying a car. If you want to buy a car, where do you want to go? You know, is it going to be, you'd say, is it going to be for little trips or is it going to be for big trips? So in the same way, there's different types of student machines. if there's a student coming onto a computing course, they will need, a heavier duty machine than a student that's coming in doing maybe something like social care or, something. It depends on what you want the PC for. It depends on how much money you have. It depends on how long you want it for. So, and then maybe, if there's somebody listening in that it isn't a student one, what do you want it for? Is it for just watching movies? Is it for checking? And I really I mean this utterly respectfully, for checking RIP.ie every day, because that's loads of people's use case.
Yeah.
And you really don't need a high-end spec machine to do that. You need low cost and so on. So first of all, what will you need it for? How long do you need it for? So for instance, for students doing a 4-year course, most students effectively in any kind of computing kind of course will have a laptop by the time they're in 4th year. Some of them,
I'd say you could put that across any discipline, to be honest with you. If I look around here and other colleges that I've been to and other universities, everyone has laptops or devices of some type.
Devices of some kind. Now, I mean, what you could do is, for instance, if money's a bit tight, what you can do is buy a fairly low level one, wait until you go out in your placement. Hopefully you get paid placement and come back and forth with a much better one. So there's all that range of stuff. What are this is before we go into any technical stuff. Are you going to be dragging it around on your back every day? Are you walking into work 3 miles, into college 3 miles? So you don't want a big, are you going to be typing on it? If you're going to be typing on it all day, if it's going to be a screen you're using, you need a big screen, you need a nice keyboard. So those are things you don't think of, and people get kind of het up about the processing size, which is important as well. But it's not that. It's not just that is important for the spec. So what you wanted, if you wanted just to watch movies, really, if you're stuck for money, is that really important? So it depends on where your priorities on your money, on your limited budget is going to be. So maybe a smaller machine with a nicer spec inside with the processor and so on is what you need, and we'll talk about that later on. If you're a student in engineering or computing or something that you need there, think about typing. Do not buy something if you haven't typed for a few minutes on a small keyboard. If you're looking for a small keyboard, it's not pleasant. Size of screen, what you're going to do, robustness of the machine. Are you somebody that drops things? Security on it.
You're not. I can see you kind of winking over a column, because Colin has had that issue.
I'm
which
winking
we'll come
in
back
a
to in a
completely
second.
non aggressive way. I'd like to find out. Yeah, so the column has a little story about that. But people drop things. Some people won't drop it because they'll be leaving the laptop in the same place. So there's all sorts of those things. But think about it before you go into the shop and you get blinded by all these great deals. When you go in for a deal, do you need the software they're bundling with it if you're stuck for money? If you go in and they're bundling certain software, for instance, all of our students in WIT get, while they're in WIT, get free access to Microsoft Office Suite. So if that's bundled, ask them for another bundle instead. So there's all those things you can have a look at when you're looking at, and just make sure you're getting good value for what you want, not for what's out there in the DID shelves when you go there, and get somebody that you can kind of trust on it as well. Yeah.
So to summarise that, it depends.
yeah,
Exactly.
But you're right though, in that there's a whole minefield.
Absolutely.
So I thought we might kind of go back. So we've set out the stall now that it does depend, and it really depends on what your use case is and your budget and a whole variety of other factors. But we might go back to maybe some of the basics. So if somebody looks at a machine and you don't know your gigahertz from your megabytes, and it's all just Greek, because it is actually from Greek numbers, it's all Greek to you. Maybe we might try and break down what some of those values are. So, and maybe some of the components. So if we talk about a computer, Siobhan, what are the main components of a computer?
Right, there's a hell of a lot of things that are in an actual computer, but the 3 things that I generally look at are: what is the CPU, what's the processor, it's interchangeably called the processor, the central processing unit, and there's always a number associated with that, and we'll come back to that in a second. The second thing I look at is the RAM. The RAM is really important as well. That's your random access memory, and we'll talk about what that is as well. The higher number, the better. And then there's also the hard disk, your storage. And there's two different types of storage that you can have. There's a solid state drive, and there's also the hard disk. So the solid state is much better. But any time that you're looking at a computer, it's the higher the number, the better, except for when you come to the hard drives. And so the ones that, if we go back to the CPU, and if we look at just the Intel ones, so this is the one that runs your computer. It processes all of those little instructions.
It's the brain of the
machine. It's the brain of the computer. The higher the number, the better. So Intel package them with like i3, i5, i7. There's now i9. So they all go up in number, in sequence. So the higher, the better. But once you go higher with those, they cost more. So you need to figure out, well, what's a good balance for what I need? Like I have an i5 and it's grand. It's working perfectly. I would have loved an i7, but I just couldn't stretch the extra 300 quid on top of the price of the machine for the i7 at the time I bought it. So that's your CPU, and that'll process all your instructions. Your RAM then is your little... Yes.
Can I just go back to you before you move off from processor?
Yeah.
So you have those, but there's also the speed of the processor.
Yeah. So you'll have a gigahertz.
So we talk about hertz. So what a hertz is, one operation per second. So if something was 200 hertz, it would be 200 operations per second. So we get into the Greek numbers, and we might just do them now because they're going to come up again and again. So we have one, then we have kind of kilo, which is 1,000. Well, actually, in computing terms, it's 1,024, but we'll say 1,000 just for the sake of argument, okay? If you want to know more, come to a computer science class and we'll tell you why 2 is important. So a kilo is 1,000. Mega is 1,000, which is a million. And then you have giga, which is another 1,000 of those, so 1,000 million. And then you have tera, which would be another 1,000 of those again, and so on and so on and so on. Was it Peta is after that, is it?
Peta, I think,
and so on and so on. They're all Greek. So when if you have a clock speed of 2 gigahertz, say for example, that would mean your processor runs 2,000 operations per second, or 2,000 million operations per second. Which is a lot.
Which is a lot more than we can think of.
It is a lot. So again,
the higher the better.
The higher the number, the better. Although not always, because
it depends
some of them
on also.
You could have a processor that goes at 1 gigahertz, but actually does more at each operation than maybe one at 1.7 or something like that. But we get so that's the processor. And
then you'll see cores coming in. You'll see some of them mentioning cores. So the more cores, the better, which means it can do more things at the same time.
Yes.
So
essentially, like if you have a single core processor, it's one processor. But if you dual core.
Which is 2 processors, and then you got your quad cores and so on up to 32. I think is where they are at the moment. I don't know. Is it 32?
I don't know. Not any machine that I've been looking at.
Yeah. I have 4, I think.
So the thing to watch out for there is that sometimes you can have a slower processor speed, but if it has multiple cores, it'll just think of
go
those
faster.
as multipliers.
Yeah.
So again, this sounds like engines, and somebody's talking to you about cars. It can be quite confusing, but basically the headline numbers aren't necessarily always the best. And I know you mentioned there that the higher the number isn't necessarily always the best, but they are generally measured in that way. So we'll go on then to the memory.
So then you've got your memory. So your memory is your RAM. So basically what that is that the higher, this one is a clear-cut one. It's measured in megabytes. So the higher the number, the actual better it is. And there's no other extra little bits like dual cores and things like that generally on it. It's just a measure. So they generally go up in 2s. I've seen them going up in 2s from 2 to 4 to 6 and so on. But the thing is, are multiples of 2 to the power of, isn't it?
Well, they're always powers of 2.
To the powers of 2. So 8 is what I have, and it's perfect. 8.
So a byte is a single unit of memory.
I said megabytes. See, this is the start of the semester, right? I would like to apologise. I will kick into normality.
But I mean, but you're right though. But a byte is a single unit of memory. So again, gigabyte is 1,000 million units of memory. So,
and a good one would be 8 for anyone who's looking for any sort of a decent amount of speed. 4 would be, if you can't stretch beyond 4, I would really try and find the extra money to just try and get the 8. And
just a little warning, you'll see a lot of what look like the same laptops, particularly when you look at them side by side, but one is really cheap. And usually it's because it's only got 2 gigs of RAM.
Just
don't buy it. Just don't buy it.
Yes,
So and then the next thing you were talking about was the hard drives.
It's the hard drive. So with this, you've got 2 different types of hard drives. You'll see the standing there beside the number when you're looking at the hard drives, or you'll see an SDD, or SSD. So the HDD is the older style one where there's a lot of moving parts in it, and they generally are measured in much bigger numbers, more storage space. So this is where you'll store all of your files, and they're generally measured in much bigger storage space than the other ones, the solid state drives, the SSDs. But the SSDs are faster. So you need to compromise there, figure out, well, do I want the faster one that has a smaller capacity for storage compared to the bigger one that isn't as fast? So once again, we're looking at speed. As programmers, we're always looking at speed. So I personally have the solid state drive in there. And you do notice a big difference. Mairead got her one, her Pro changed.
Upgraded, yeah. So I was having bad problems with it. Was the machine was looking old, so I got a solid state drive swapped in instead of the old one. Huge difference. It's like a new machine. It's like a new machine. Yeah.
But you probably
phenomenal.
sacrificed.
And it's only, I know it's half the size, but actually
It's grand.
128 gigs. Like, what would I be doing with 256 gigs?
Yeah.
You know, and you can,
Famous last words.
famous last word. No, but you know, worst case scenario, you get a big USB and you throw stuff
Well,
on
that's
the
it,
cloud.
exactly.
And there's
Yeah,
the cloud
yeah.
as well. All of our students have access to the OneDrive. So they will have a certain amount of storage space that's up in the cloud. So even though you can't store it physically on your computer that you're buying, you can push a lot of your files and all of the stuff you need to store up to the cloud. So realistically, I would always go for the solid state drive as opposed to the other one, the hard disk,
In your use case.
in my use case.
But if it was, say, somebody who wanted
Didn't have
to
access,
have a load
yeah.
of movies and
Yeah, yeah.
games, say
Yeah.
a gamer
Yeah.
who was interested, they might be more interested in the capacity.
the capacity
But
compared
again-
to it. Yep.
Right.
Yep.
So what we've laid out there is some of the main components of a machine. Actually, anyone who's in my computer science class next week will be talking about the von Neumann architecture, which is the architecture that has governed most computers that we know of follow this architecture, and it's been around since the 1940s. And it basically consists of a processor, memory, and then input-output subsystem, which is everything else, which is basically the processor, the memory, and the hard drive would belong to the input-output subsystem. And then you would have everything else, which includes networks and screens and keyboards and mice and other input devices and printers and you name it. So all of those items are very important on a computer, but there are other factors that are important when you're buying a computer as well that maybe aren't as apparent if you were to look at an ad. And Colin, because Mairead hinted at it, we were talking about form factor and maybe other things. You have a story to tell about 2 laptops in your house.
Oh yeah. So I have 4 kids. We won't name them and shame them, but
But you know who you are.
you know who you are, right? So one of the things is they like to watch movies. Okay, so they use their laptop to watch the movies. They're streaming them, and they have a tendency to fall asleep watching the movies late at night. So they fall out of the bed.
Yeah.
And so
The laptops are the children.
both. The metal laptop, which will cost you more.
Yeah.
Okay, it will survive that. The plastic ones won't.
Yeah.
Plastic are most other laptops. So it's just a story. We've lost 2 in our house,
Yes.
and I'm not replacing them.
But that's a factor that might, whether it's a plastic chassis or a metal chassis or a combination or whatever, that obviously the metal ones are more expensive, but they are more durable.
Yes.
So if you're somebody who's likely to be in a situation like that or have a machine that is being moved around a lot, maybe the metal one might be a bit of a better option for you.
And one of the most common things that will go if you are buying a laptop is when you're opening it and closing it and opening and closing it,
Yes.
is the hinges.
Yes.
Okay. And the most common thing that happens to them with the plastic ones is the hinge will literally start coming out through the plastic. And generally speaking, you can't fix that.
Yeah.
So that's just something to bear in mind. So yes, you can get cheaper laptops. They don't tend to last.
Yes.
That's my
But again, going back to
Plastic
what
story.
Mairead said at the start, is what do you want the machine for and how long do you need it? If you,
Exactly.
I just need something for a year to get me through a project or whatever, and I don't need anything that's particularly computationally intensive, well, then you can buy that cheap laptop for €300 or €400.
Yeah.
And it might do the job for you fine. You don't need to go off and spend $2,000 on a new MacBook Pro or whatever, is the kind
absolutely
of thing there.
yeah.
So, but
there's Windows computers tend to be a lot cheaper, and Chromebooks are even cheaper again. So if all you're going to do is check RIP, I would suggest go for a Chromebook.
Yeah.
Okay. If you need to use any installed software at all, then you won't be using that. So you're going to have to use a Windows computer. Is probably going to be the cheapest one next. But if you're doing media production, yeah, it's going to be Mac or a Surface Pro or a really top end computer. The other things to consider, do you need a laptop in the first place?
I was going to get to that next. You beat me to it.
So if you do need a laptop, then there's different form factors. So you can have your traditional laptop that you open up, but then we all got into tablets and iPads and things. So laptops now double up. So you can get a laptop that's a 2-in-1. So it looks like a laptop normally, but then you can fold it over and use it like a tablet.
Like Siobhan Surface Pro.
Yep.
Which you can actually take off the keyboard from.
Just pull it off and leave it.
So if that one thing is what you like, you can probably add €400 to the base price of a laptop just to get that one feature. Okay, so we were talking about maybe you could buy more than one laptop, and you could if that's the only feature you're looking for. If you don't need a laptop, if you're always going to be working at your desk at home, then maybe a desktop is something you're going to look for. Also, if you're really into games, then the desktop is going to be a better bang for your buck. And desktop comes in different formats. So we have the traditional tower, which is like a big rectangle box, doesn't look particularly nice. And if you're into gaming, those towers now come liquid cooled, but no point in getting a liquid cooled tower if all you're going to do is type a Word document, right? So you don't need to overspec.
So here's the question then.
Yeah.
We might just explore that thing. Do you need a laptop in the first place? Because this comes back to the whole thing of it. Well, it depends. Because Mairead, you mentioned like somebody who just wants a machine in the house. Let's say an older person who might just want a machine in the house for maybe some emailing and checking RIP
and Skyping.
and
Just say Skyping
is
kids that are abroad, which is a huge issue for people. Yeah,
which is exactly those type of things. You know, a laptop might be actually a waste of time. They might be much better off with a desktop machine.
Yeah.
And the great thing about desktops is they tend to be cheaper. And they're also much easier to upgrade if you need to do that. Now, maybe somebody might necessarily want to upgrade their machine.
Absolutely. And you can, upgrade the screen separate from, so you're getting into the idea of separateness. So now you can decide to upgrade the bits of it separately. So you might want a bigger screen. You might want to put it, just say you can link it into your television as a screen. You can do all those kind of things. Just say if you have young kids and you want to localize so that everybody can see what's happening, that they're not going to be able to bring the desktop in up to their bedrooms easily. So there's all those sorts of issues. Laptops are great for kids as they grow older and they want, so there's all those things. You will get much, much better bang for your buck. Some students, for instance, if they're, it's all about budget, they can work on their desktop at home. They can upload, as we talked about, to OneDrive and then come in and work on OneDrive from the college machines. Students in their later years don't tend to do that, but certainly for first year, if you want to see where they lay of the line, it's absolutely acceptable to do that. And you can get much cheaper ones, you can get much better ones, you can upgrade it as you need to as well.
The handy thing about laptop or desktops is as well. Now I don't have a desktop actually at the moment. I have one in storage that I just don't use anymore. I haven't thrown it away though, but I don't really use it much anymore. But say my parents-in-law, my wife's parents, we've them set up with a desktop, and a couple of years ago we replaced it, but we just needed to buy the box.
Absolutely.
The monitor they had was perfectly fine. Everything else was perfectly fine. We just replaced the box, and actually we did replace another item, which was the camera, the webcam. So we got a HD webcam for Skyping and video calls and things like that. But other than that, it was a much easier thing. So for them, it didn't seem any different because the box is kind of hidden away.
And it's in the same place.
Oh, it's in the same
even
place.
Simple things like that. It's in the same
that.
place, kind of looks the same.
Yeah.
And
But again, maybe somebody who was into programming, maybe you couldn't afford to buy maybe you knew, let's say a computing student. Okay, I need to do this, that, and the other thing. I could maybe go with a desktop. Like you could buy maybe a cheaper desktop now.
Yes.
And then say, but I'll upgrade this. So, for example, you can't afford to get the SSD right now, but you say, look, you get the basic hard drive, and then you'll swap in an SSD in a year's time when you have the money.
Absolutely.
And it's very easy to do that. Like surgery on desktops is quite easy. On laptops, it's a bit more complicated.
Yes.
And has become increasingly complicated in the last while. Like, for example, my wife's I bought her a computer in 2008. Again, it was a MacBook.
Aren't you
Ash, I'm brilliant, aren't I? Love it.
Rob, would
Yeah.
you look
And I bought it with my own money.
your
and all
own
that.
money and all?
For Valentine's Day.
Little treasure.
Actually, it was a birthday present. Actually.
It's a Homer present.
No, sorry, it was it was a Christmas present. Well, it was for her, it wasn't for me.
It was but not a Homer present. No.
No, it wasn't. No. I got to service it and make sure everything was working on it. But I bought her a machine in 2008. It was a MacBook I bought in 2008. I bought it was a mid-range one. I think it cost a little over €1,000 ish at the time, which is a lot of money, right? But she got 10 years out of that.
Yeah.
No, I did replace the hard drive with an SSD. I upgraded the RAM. Unfortunately, with the MacBooks now, you can't do that
No.
because the RAM is soldered in, so it's very difficult to do that. So if you're buying one of those machines and it has 8 gigs, you're stuck with 8 gigs. You
Yeah.
can't. Well, I believe you can, but there's a fair bit of jiggery pokery involved.
Most people can't.
And I wouldn't recommend
Yeah,
doing it unless
yeah,
you
most people can't.
knew your onions.
Yeah.
So, what about? And this is one that you've mentioned Chromebooks, Colin.
Yes.
So Chromebooks are like netbooks, things that would have been called a couple of years ago. What do you think of them?
So they're, if all you're doing is using something like Google Docs in a browser, okay, most people are familiar with Google Docs. So you're always you have to be connected to the internet. So if you've got a bad internet connection or no internet connection, this is not going to do anything for you. You can't use it. Okay? But if you're just going to use a browser and everything that you do is in the browser, and increasingly in computing, that's the way things are going, then they're fine and they're very cheap. You know, you're talking probably 60% of the price of any other computer you're looking at.
Yeah, I'm not a big fan of them myself. Just I've had too many people who buy them and then later on they want to do something.
Yes,
And they can't do
so
it.
that's the question, right? It's what we comes back to the start. What do you want to do with it? I have a question that I ask people when they come to me, and I say, are you going to do any pictures or videos on your computer? And the minute they say yes, okay, then you're not looking for a bottom of the range computer. You're looking for something more powerful. Likewise, speed is everything, because even though we know about the specifications to get the faster computer, your average person doesn't like waiting, a minute for the computer to start. And what you find with your desktops, because you constantly have to update them with patches and updates, it gets slower and slower and slower and slower. And before you know it, it's 2 minutes to turn on the computer. People just won't wait that long anymore. They just want it to happen straight away. So therefore, you're buying a more expensive computer.
Yeah. What about a tablet? Could I just use a tablet?
Again, sorry, I'm jumping
Yeah,
in.
No, go for it.
Yeah.
Jump away.
It depends. We keep coming back to that. So let's talk. I have an example. My in-laws.
Yeah.
Okay. So in their 70s, they went out and just bought a laptop. They had the patience to wait for the spec. I said, "Yeah, I'll get you one." And no, I'm buying it today, right now. Boom, done.
Yeah.
Right. And I'm faced with having to constantly fix that.
Yeah.
Right?
Are you tech support for your friends and family?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's
Are
nice.
we as well?
Oh, yeah.
I am as
Yeah.
well.
They try, not the second time.
So this is where the tablet comes in.
Yeah.
So again, they're watching all the kids, the grandkids playing, and when they come round, they're on their computers, on their tablets, and say, "Oh, that tablet's lovely. Oh, it's touchscreen. I don't have to worry about a mouse." That's a big deal for a lot of people.
Yeah.
I just point at it and it works. So you don't have to constantly maintain the tablet. So I love tablets for a certain type of usage.
Yeah.
I'm going on to rip.ie.
Perfect.
I need to book the holiday flights. I need to send an email. If that's all you want to do, tablets.
And Skype.
Perfect.
Yeah. Yeah.
And Skype.
Or any
Yeah.
of those type of things.
Whatever.
Yeah, they're great.
Even watching Netflix.
Oh, it's great.
Yeah, it's brilliant.
Browsing the web.
Yeah.
Watching. Yeah.
And like everything else, you have kind of two categories of tablets. You have your Apple ones, and then you have Android. The Apple one, I don't have to service. The Android ones, you do.
Yeah.
So,
And again,
There
it
you
comes back to you get what you pay for. I suppose
Yeah.
that's maybe the tenet that you can take away from today.
Yeah.
And with the Apple as well, though, they do get very slow very quickly. I think the iPad I found more so than the MacBook Pro. I'm a kind of an Apple head.
I wouldn't experience that at all.
Okay.
With the iPad compared to some of the Android tablets. That are
Okay, well, you see, I'm not used to the Androids, but
Oh,
I
yeah.
yeah.
Like I have an iPad 2, that I have only recently retired. And
Okay.
actually, it's still kind of there as a little
Yeah.
video
Yeah.
device for the kids when we go on long journeys in the car.
Okay.
And I have an iPad Mini.
Yeah.
I can't remember which model number it is, and that's going. I've had that now for maybe 6 or 7 years, and it's
Okay.
still. It's not as fast as it used to be, and I wouldn't use it for any. I wouldn't use it for any heavy duty activities, but for browsing, bit of video, listening to music, it still does its job. You know?
I think some of the issues that come up with these is particularly battery. So battery.
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
probably the
battery's a
battery
massive
and-
issue. Yeah, we
yeah.
haven't talked about
Big
that
issue.
actually.
So,
Yeah.
Yeah.
so particularly with if you're going iPads,
Yeah.
tablets, they're dead after 5 years. That's been my experience. So I have an original iPad, and then I think I have a version 2. I didn't bother buying one after that. I got so annoyed with the batteries are just dead, and you can't just go in and replace them. It's a pain. The other things, buying a computer, just to get back to it, we had one of the things that will add 200 or 300 quid to your laptop if you were buying one is a graphics card.
Oh
You
yeah.
know,
So if
so-
you're a gamer,
If you're a gamer, you're going to want to have a graphics card. If you're not a gamer, it's not so important.
What do you mean by graphics card exactly?
So we talked about the processor earlier. A graphics card is like a processor that offloads all the drawing on the screen to a separate piece of hardware. Now, that can be done by the main processor, or it can be a graphics card. And a graphics card used to be called a co-processor. So it was like the processor for the main computer, and then we offload the drawing of the screen graphics to a separate processor.
So if an ad doesn't specifically say it has a graphics card, we can assume it's not there.
Therefore it's
Yeah.
integrated.
Yeah.
Okay. One little gotcha with those was there was a lot of people playing what was it called?
SimCity?
Sims.
The
The
Sims.
Yeah. And you had lots of kids trying to play The Sims, and with an integrated graphics, it didn't work.
yeah.
Yeah. So games come with a minimum specification for a graphics card. So if gaming is something you're going to use your laptop for, you are going to want to look at graphics cards.
Which again is increasing the price. Actually, it's an interesting one that you mentioned that because, again, it's something I do in a lab with some of the first years, probably maybe not next week, the week after when we've gone through some of the detail a bit more. I use games as an example because games always specify a minimum and recommended requirements of this processor, this much RAM, this type of graphics card, and then looking at how much would that machine cost. So often what you see is the minimum isn't too bad, but the recommended costs a fortune to build, and but it's an interesting one. So if you don't need to play games and you've no interest in playing games, there is absolutely no point in spending a load of money on a graphic card that you don't
Absolutely.
need.
The other thing that kind of changes the price on your laptops, when you're on a budget, all these things are pushing towards what can I afford to get, and you're trying to get the best spec for the budget you have, is the screen, the actual screen. And you shouldn't overlook this because it's the thing you're going to be looking at the most. You spend hours and hours looking at a laptop screen, and you do want to get a quality screen. This day and age, I would be recommending that you have a full HD screen. Unfortunately, in computing, we talk about HD. In computing screens, a HD screen is not a full HD screen. And just to explain the difference, full HD is what you would have on your full HD TV at home. It's what you're watching on YouTube. It's 1920 by 1080 pixels. So that's the width by the height. And that's a really good specification to get in a screen. A lot of the cheaper ones will be 1336 by some magic number, and even lower again. I think it's really worth it. For your eyesight, get a decent screen.
Yeah, if you're looking at it all day like we would be, you definitely
Yeah.
want to have the higher, like our 4K screen or 5K screen or whatever like that. I don't have one of those because I don't have budget.
Silly money. Then,
But I know, like say, a lot of my friends who are graphic designers wouldn't even entertain anything less.
Yeah.
Because that's what they look at all day, every day.
And then if you take it back, if you're not going to be looking at that laptop screen the whole time, a lot of people never consider that you can plug external monitors into a laptop. So this is where you might go for a smaller, lighter laptop, and then for your heavy work, you would plug in an external monitor. Monitors are after getting really cheap. You can get a high quality monitor now for about 140, 150 euros. That might be a better option.
I gave each of you a sheet
Yeah.
before we began. Because this again is one of the things that sparked off the idea of recording a podcast on this subject. In WAT, we all received an email last week, I think it was, with this great deal on a computer, and immediately I got emails back. Is this a good one to buy for my son, my daughter, for me, etc.? And it's a machine. We won't name the shop just because we don't want to do that, and we mightn't even name the brand of the machine just in case, so they don't come back and sue us or something like that for maybe saying something disparaging about it. So this is a machine that has a whole load of numbers attached with it that can just seem like gobbledygook. But then with the trained eye, you can look at it, and there isn't actually a huge amount of detail there. But what we see is that it's got an Intel i3 processor. Then it says 8GB/128GB /laptop/silver. And then we go down and we see screen size is 15.6 inches, full HD for stunning picture. Processor, Intel i3 dual core processor. Storage, 128GB, plenty of room to store your data. It actually says to storage your data. They have a misprint there, but anyway. And then it says RAM, 8GB, multitask seamlessly. That's all of the information that's presented with that. It's €500. Great deal. Is it a great deal, Siobhan?
Once again, depends what you're using it for. But I'm going straight into, first thing that jumps out at me straight away is Intel i3. That's kind of the bottom end of the processors. You'll see Celeron and Pentium and all these. Yeah. They are the budget ones. They are just for RIP.ie.
Yeah.
But the i3 is it's one of the lower processors that are out there at the moment, and it's dual core as well, which is only 2 cores. That's what we were talking about before, how it can only run 2 things simultaneously. The processor is kind of low, but there is 8 gigs of RAM. There's not enough information on the storage. It just says 128 gigabytes.
I would assume it's SSD, but it doesn't say that.
Yeah, it doesn't say it.
Yeah.
But because it's low, it more than likely is SSD, but it doesn't say it. If you've got just the old style hard discs, that's going to impact on your performance as well.
Any other things jumping out at you about that machine? Any of you?
The price.
It's quite high for that spec, yeah.
So I have bought this particular brand, which we won't mention, 3 years ago. I spent that money, and the processor was a lot higher, and doesn't say anything about the screen. Other than the size.
It says it's full HD.
It does say full HD. Again, that comes with a warning, okay, because full HD in a computer spec doesn't necessarily mean full HD. Okay. There's not enough information, but personally, I wouldn't buy this computer purely because it's got an i3. It's no matter who you are, that's going to be too slow within 6 months.
Right. Well, I'm going to deviate from that slightly.
Yeah.
Okay. I don't think this is a particularly good deal of a machine. I definitely agree with you with that, because even if it is 128 gig SSD, I think the benefit you get from the SSD will be negated by the i3. What's really kind of bugging me about this machine is the 15.6 inch form factor. I suspect this machine will be quite big and heavy to bring around. There's no details about what the weight of it is, but I'd say it's probably reasonably heavy. I'd suspect it's also a plastic chassis, because it looks like low-end components. So I'd say it's not the most durable machine. If you were looking for something cheap and cheerful to have around the house, maybe it's okay. I suspect you could get something cheaper. So it wouldn't really do an awful lot for me. But I did buy a machine for somebody in the last couple of weeks with an i3 processor for a student, somebody going off to first year.
Shame on you.
Shame. Well, but here, and I tell you the reason why, right? So here is the reason why: because portability was one of the key factors for this person. So portability, she's going off to study primary school teaching, okay? And she's going to be out and about doing an awful lot of teaching practice and moving around here, there and everywhere, okay? So portability was a big thing. So she was looking for a smaller machine, and the smaller machines tend to be more expensive. Small, light machines tend to be more expensive. So I bought a machine, it was a Lenovo machine. It had an i3 processor with the RAM, 256 storage, but it was a 14-inch machine, and it was about 1.5 kilos in weight. It was very, very light and quite thin. And I thought the trade-off from having an i5 processor to having the i3 processor and the budget jump that would have been involved in that, because that made this fit in the budget. So the use case there, I thought, worked. Now the only thing she's going to need it for is Office-y type applications and a bit of browsing, email, social media. There's no video editing or anything like that. So in this instance, I thought that would work for her. Colin is going, you fool. but I do think it'll work, and I think it'll work fine for her. And I think she'll get at least
Until
2
she
years
says,
out of it.
I have to do a presentation.
No, that'll be absolutely fine on it. Absolutely fine on it. Absolutely fine on it. Well, I think it will anyway. You know. Mairead, any thoughts on that machine?
Yeah, just one thing, I suppose, to sum it up, I think it's neither, it's not cheap enough and it's not good enough. You know, if it were much cheaper for that, then you'd say go for it, or if it were much higher spec. The other possibility, if you're on a budget and you know what you want, there's renovated products as well that are available from
like refurbished.
Refurbished is what I
Yes,
was
yeah,
using.
yeah.
And you will get, again, if you're looking for something to keep you going until placement or for the first 2 years, they're a very, very good deal, you know. And make sure you're getting them from an established source.
I bought a refurbed Mac Mini.
Yeah.
Oh, this is it's a long time ago now. I bought a refurb Mac Mini, and I used it as a media center underneath the television. I got years out of it. Years out, and it was about €100 off the price of a new one.
Yeah.
For the same model, essentially.
Yeah.
There's lots of people out there who like to have the latest, greatest everything. You know, the minute the new model comes out, they buy it. Buy their old computer.
Oh yeah.
Well, if you trust them.
And you can save a fortune, right?
Yeah.
And of course now with online adverts, you know, we won't mention the companies, but it's very easy to buy secondhand, and we've had a lot of good stories from buying those.
There probably are bad stories as well if you don't know what you're doing. It's like buying a second-hand car if you don't know what you're looking for.
The thing is we've gone through specs here in this talk today, so if you know what the specs are, then you know what you're buying.
Yeah.
And a 2 or 3 year old computer is still a really good computer. And like many have said, we've got computers that are 10 years old that we're still using. You know, if you get the right spec.
Okay, so let's summarise all this up. We'll just go back to the question again.
It depends.
I'm buying a new computer. What should I get?
It depends on what you want.
It depends on what you want, exactly. Congratulations, right answer. So it's shades of grey. Look, it really does depend, and there's no one right answer. It depends on you and what your use case is. So I maybe identify that first. Then have a look at what your budget is. There's no point in making out a use case that's a MacBook Pro and you have a budget of 600 quid. Good luck.
Absolutely.
It's not going to happen unless maybe you get lucky with a second-hand one, although those tend to hold their value, so you probably won't get something in that price range. And then maybe make out some specs. Maybe look at one thing I always recommend is there any specific software that you need? And look at what's required for that. So software could be a game, or maybe you need to use
Android Studio or something for development. That's heavy.
Yeah, that's very heavy.
Yeah.
As you and I both know. If
Photoshop,
you're photoshopping or using any sort of audio or video editing tools, there might be minimum recommended requirements there. Try and meet those. Or the other one that I often say, and particularly to students, I say this: well, do you need a laptop at all? Can you wait? You know, can you wait a little while? I'm after having so many questions from first years this week who are just mad to buy something, or perhaps their parents are mad to buy something. And I see it every year. Somebody comes in with a machine that was bought in a supermarket on a great deal, something like the machine that we've just described. Yeah. And it's sadly for them, it's a paperweight in a year.
Computing students in particular should wait a year, because in your first year you learn to be able to read all this gobbledygook and understand what it means. So absolutely wait until the end of first
And they'll know themselves when they need to buy one. As in, they'll feel the pinch of, right, I can't work efficiently without having one now. And you'll know that point when it comes. It's usually at the end of first, you begin the second year sometime.
Or maybe even after the first semester.
So hang on.
You'll have gone to all of Rob's lectures and you'll know all of this stuff.
And all of the programming lectures.
That's
and
it.
Frightened out of you.
And the software that you'll need as well for the first 6 months isn't really the heavy programming software either that we'd be using. It only starts kicking in really in the second semester onwards for myself and Mairead anyway. I'm talking about the two of us.
Yeah, no, but I know. But you use Eclipse, is it?
We move into IntelliJ in the second semester.
Okay,
and it can be the machine that we have here. It could be a bit of a challenge for us after a while. But you'll know then what type of machine you need when you do hit the second semester, based on the software that you're now beginning to be introduced to.
But if you're, say, a business studies student,
Oh, yeah.
and again, all you need is office type things. Well, maybe you can go with a lower end machine. But if
That's
you're
it.
a computing or an engineering or a science student that maybe needs specific packages, hang on if you can.
Yeah.
And maybe you have a money put aside, but maybe you can add some more to that so that
Santa might be good.
Yeah, in January, February, or March, you might be able to get something then that might actually suit you. Right, I think we'll call it a day there. We have one more thing to get into, or two more things I just want to do. So the first one is to give out details about us on social media. I'm not great on social media, but we are at machine_podcast on Twitter. That will be activated again today. It's gone kind of dark over the summer, as I have had trying to stay off social media. We're also Machine Podcast on Facebook. Don't really keep it up too much, but I am going to be a bit more proactive in terms of keeping the social media updated. I'm not doing Instagram or Snapchat or TikTok or any of those things, because I'm like granddad wading in with my size 11s making bags of it. But please do leave us a review, 5-star review only, please, on any of your preferred podcasting platforms. We're available on iTunes, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, Anchor. I don't know if we're on Acast. A lot of people are using Acast now, so I must check out, see if we are. If we're not, I will sort it out. Last season on the machine, we used cooking analogies as best we could to illustrate what we've been discussing. And Siobhan, you have come up with a beautiful cooking analogy for buying a PC. So off you go.
Okay, so the main we talked about the processor, we talked about RAM, which is your random access memory, and we talked about the hard drive. So our cooking analogy, what we're going to say is the processor, that's your countertop in the kitchen. Okay, that's where you do all of the prepping of your meals. Your RAM, they're all your kitchen cupboards with all of your stuff in them. And then you've got your hard drive. That's going to be your supermarket. So obviously the supermarket is much further away than your kitchen cupboards are. So when you're going to cook something, what you need to do is get your countertop ready, and you go to your kitchen cupboards. It's a really short journey. You go straight up to your kitchen cupboards, you take out what you need, and you put it on your countertop and you start prepping your meal. But if you don't have enough space in your kitchen cupboards for a particular item, you've got to go all the way over to the supermarket, and you've got to go and get it, bring it all the way back and put it on your countertop. And that slows you down. So in that situation, if you don't have enough space in your kitchen cupboards, if you make your cupboards much bigger, if you build on a lovely extension for yourself and take all the stuff that you need into your kitchen cupboards, you can make your meal faster. So you want to minimise the amount of trips down to the supermarket, which is your hard drive, as you can in your computer, and that'll speed up everything. So your processor is the kitchen counter, your RAM is your kitchen cupboards, which are really close and really easy to get into, and your hard drive is the supermarket, miles away.
And again, if your kitchen counter has a hob that only gets to a certain temperature,
you
can only cook the food in a certain speed.
Yeah.
So if you have one that gets to an even higher temperature, you can do that lovely fillet
you can
steak.
do. Oh God, you could. Yeah.
And just say the SSD would be if you had a high-speed train from your house to the shop. Hard drive is like you have to walk to the shop and back.
Yeah, exactly.
You still have to go, but it's quicker.
I feel like I'm on MasterChef here. This
Yeah,
is
yeah,
fabulous.
there you go.
You're all cooking around my house.
That's great. Listen, thanks very much for listening to The Machine. We will be back hopefully reasonably soon enough with another episode. Massive thank you to Mairead Maher, Siobhan Drohan and Colm Dunphy for having a chat. My name is Rob O'Connor, and hopefully we will talk to you again soon.